We awoke next day to find more bleak weather. It wasn't forecast to rain, but it was quite windy and quite cold. We didn't have too far to go today. We were aiming to rendezvous with Sue's dad's boat in Ely. To get there, that meant crossing the tidal section at Salters Lode, and you can only do that when the tide is at the right height. So for us, we knew it was going to be around about a 1 o'clock passage through that section. As you can see, the fens are still very, very straight and long at this stage, so there wasn't a huge amount of scenery. At the point where Well Creek joins Old Popham's O at Narrowboat is a very, very low bridge. In fact, we just scraped underneath there. The bridge is called Narrowboat Farm Bridge, and its lack of air clearance was only matched by a bridge we'd encountered a couple of hours earlier at Upwell. We arrived at the lock at Salters Lode at noon. You have to remember, originally these locks were for fen lighters. These were only 46 foot 11 inches long. So most of the locks along this section had been enlarged, and Salters Lode is no different. It wasn't long till Mohawk caught up with us, so we popped over the seawall and had a look at the challenge to come. About 1:30 we were given the all clear to enter the lock, and I must admit I was glad that we were on the move again. The actual lock itself is quite unusual. It has this big hydraulic mechanism at the front that opens the paddles in a most unusual way. As it happens, there wasn't a great difference in height between the river and the canal. You have to remember that the locks here function in a very, very different way. After getting some really good advice from the temporary lockkeeper, we headed out through the lock. The tide was still ebbing, and that would mean that the boat would be pushed to the left, closer to the wall, and make it quite difficult to turn the boat early. But I did notice that the wind was coming in the opposite direction, so as soon as I cleared the wall, I knew the wind would help with the turn. As soon as I got clear of the wharf side, I put down loads of power and Jubilee spun quickly and we headed upriver. The lockkeeper had warned me about a shallow patch here to the left, so we gave that a nice wide berth. This other boat coming downstream wasn't quite so lucky. After only 8 minutes on tidal waters, we found ourselves going into the lock at Denver. It was at this point we had a call from the boat we were rendezvousing with. They hadn't made it as far as Ely, and instead they were at the pump house at Green End Bridge. As this was only an additional 5 miles, we decided we'd meet them anyway. Leaving the lock at Denver, you can see the Great Ouse has got a very different character to the bends. This is a big, wide, sweeping river. To the right as we left was a large area of visitors' moorings, and there was a little section of moorings to the left further along. passed through the busy town of Ely with its huge cathedral. And finally, about 7 o'clock in the evening, we reached our destination and were able to meet up with Sue's dad in his boat. All that remained for us to do is to have some dinner and wait for Kat and Andy. They were about 40-50 minutes behind us. While we were getting ready to leave next morning, we were visited by a gang of swans and ducks, all pecking at the side of the boat, looking for some breakfast. We didn't have too far to go today, just about 17 miles and 3 locks. One of those we knew had a lockkeeper. The swans were all very amiable while we were feeding them. They turned a bit ugly when we stopped. Tony and Eastmore left first, heading towards St Ives, but as Kat and Andy tried to get underway in Mohawk, they noticed a problem. Still, a couple of minutes of head scratching, a toolbox, and we soon had the boat running again. Travelling down the old West River, you do notice how the character has changed yet again. This stretch is very narrow and twisty. In fact, in a narrowboat, it's probably about as tight as you would want. We'd only been going a couple of miles when we came across this lovely looking marina. It's called 20 pence Marina, but I bet the fees are not that cheap. One of the nice things about being on this river is you do see lots of different types of craft. We were passed on this particular day by quite a lot of canoeists. I guess the sun brought them all out. Just before the Hermitage Lock, we encountered a boat coming the other way at close quarters. You do have to be careful of fiberglass boats, they're very easily damaged. So we slowed right down and moved over as far as we could. And as the traffic light at the lock was green, we went straight in. I have to say the lockkeeper here was super helpful. We had lots of questions about heading back down the 100-foot drain, which we would do in a couple of days' time. And the lockkeeper here was a mine of information. He really knew his stuff. So we were very grateful for all the insight he had to share. The day so far had been full of interesting wildlife. And as we got onto the tidal section of the Great Ouse, that didn't seem to abate at all. Lots of seabirds and just generally beautiful scenery. Of course it helped that the weather was hot and sunny by now. At Westview Marina we took the opportunity to fill up with both water and diesel. And despite them being low on fuel themselves, they were really helpful at getting our tanks topped up. We caught back up with Mohawk at Browns Hill Lock, which took us back onto the non-tidal section. And then again, about 5 miles later, we caught up with both Mohawk and Eastmore in the St Ives Lock. Just after you leave the St Ives Lock, there's a marina on your left. It's called Jones Boatyard. Mohawk took the opportunity to fill up with fuel there, but I understand the marina has great berths and great yard facilities. We, however, pressed on towards the quay at St Ives. Just as you approach the quayside at St Ives, you see the beautiful Chapel Bridge that dates back to the 15th century. There's probably been a ford here across the Ouse for over 1,000 years, but around 1100 there was the first wooden bridge built across. Later, this was replaced by a stone bridge with the unique chapel sitting on it. There's only 4 bridges like that in the UK. When you close up to the bridge, you notice 2 of the arches are actually different to the rest. The reason for this was, in the 1600s, 2 of the arches were demolished to make way for a drawbridge as part of the town's defences. A couple of miles further upstream, we reached this beautiful park area, which was to be our mooring for the night. Now normally I would moor with the bows pointing up the stream, but there was quite a strong wind coming from the stern, so I decided to use this as an opportunity to turn the boat and moor it facing downstream. Well, that's about it for this episode of the vlog. We hope you've enjoyed it. Next time, it's time for us to turn around and start to head home. And that means we've got to tackle that tidal section again. We'll run aground and tackle that difficult old lock at Salters Lode. Until then, thank you for watching, and I'll leave you with this beautiful view of the Great Ouse River.